Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly discussion series that's hosted by the Chaldean Cultural Center in collaboration with U of M Detroit Center, Unique Voices in Films, and CMN TV. I'm your host, Wiam Nemu, and our guest today is Professor Paulo Botta. Welcome.
Hello.
Paulo was born in Cordoba, Argentina. He obtained a bachelor's in international relations at Cordoba Catholic University. After that, he moved to Egypt to study Arabic at the Arabic Language Center in Cairo, where he got an Arabic Language Diploma issued by the Egyptian Ministry of Higher Education in 2002. He works as a professor at Pontifical Catholic University in Argentina, and recently the Chaldean Cultural Center sponsored a project that he began researching about a Chaldean community that has been long established in Argentina. This was such exciting work, and we will get to that in a minute. But we want to talk about how you got introduced to this project. In 2019, you reached out to the Chaldean Cultural Center and told us about these immigrants in Argentina. How did you learn about them?
Well, hello. Thank you, Ian, for having me here. It was just by chance. I mean, about 15 years ago, I met one of the members of this community, Mr. Alejandro Safarov. I work on Middle Eastern issues, and so he said that his family was from Iran. And it was pretty interesting to me because I wrote my PhD dissertation on Argentine and Iranian relations, and I never read about Iranians living in Argentina. And he said that his family are Chaldeans. They came from the northwest part of Iran, near the Urumqi Lake, and they were a group of about 30 families who arrived to Argentina. So it was a very first contact. Then we became very good friends with Alejandro, and he helped me to have to improve my contacts and the knowledge about this community. And that's why I thought that the Chaldean Cultural Center would be interested in knowing a bit more about this part of the diaspora here in Argentina that nobody knows really that this group of Chaldean families are here.
So I'm curious, did you know anything about Chaldeans prior to this introduction?
Well, yes, about Chaldeans, yes. I'm pretty interested about the Oriental Christian communities, and actually, I wrote a couple of works about the Chaldeans. I don't know the Christians, Oriental Christians here in Argentina. So I knew about Chaldeans, but not about Chaldeans living here in Argentina.
Okay, so you were aware of them. So that actually made it more of an interest for you. Is this why you understood their ancient lineage and the fact that they're in Argentina? And then, so you studied the Arabic language in Egypt. So this seems like there's a kind of interest that you have there. I'm curious, what drew you to that area? It seems like you have a passion and interest in the Middle Eastern world and the Arab world.
Well, it's a funny story because, as you can see, because of my surname, I do not have Middle Eastern roots, but Italian roots. But when I was a kid, I wanted to become an archaeologist. That was my first lab and my first connection.
There's the secret.
That's the secret. That's about the Middle Ages, Indiana Jones, and all those stuff. And so when I was about 16 years old, I began to study Arabic because I wanted to become an archaeologist. And then, Iraq invaded Kuwait and terrorists attacked here in Argentina. So when I finally finished high school, I decided that I was interested in the Middle East, but not in the historical Middle East, but in contemporary Middle East. So that's why I put my first. It's the simplest explanation about why an Italian is interested in the Middle East here in Argentina.
Okay, this is all making sense because I know the archaeologists that work in Iraq. They're amazing. They're so in love with what they do. It's you can feel it. I mean, you can see, you can feel it. And so once you have that feeling for archaeology, of course, you're going to be interested in topics related to ancient communities, especially in this case, this is kind of an archaeologist type of research because we were not aware of them. And then based on what you said later, and we'll talk about it later, that they were not even really aware of us. But before we go into this, because once you learned about them, what next steps did you want to do, and what was the challenge in pursuing that?
Well, I think that I mean, one of the things we have to bear in mind is that we have to begin from scratch because we do not have many things about this community. I mean, just a couple of articles, but not in a very detailed way. And also, we're facing again what we can say, what I call it a biological challenge, because older generations are passing away. They are the people who have the knowledge, they are part of the heritage, the family memories, language, even. So I think that we have one first challenge is that we have to begin from scratch. At the same time, at times, it's very exciting to begin a new field of research as the Chaldean community here in Argentina, and also we have to work very quickly because we do not have time. We have to preserve the memories of this community very quickly.
Yeah, I remember that you had mentioned, and again, this was in 2019 that we had the initial connection, and you talked about that, the fact that the time is, moving forward, and there's an older generation, and we were looking into it, and then COVID happened.
Yeah.
So COVID put everything on hold. I know that this kind of work, I mean, Argentina is a big country, and so it's not like something that you could just drive to this community. So luckily, after the situation changed with the whole world and restrictions were lifted, you and I reconnected about this topic because it always stayed in my mind. I thought, what a unique thing. I've never heard of these. And whoever I spoke to had never heard of a community that's in Argentina. How did they get there? What happened? What do they speak today? How connected are they to their heritage? And so we had so many questions. And so we decided, we wanted to sponsor the trip because we felt like, first of all, we felt that you would be so perfect to pursue it because your interest was so sincere. We trusted that you're going to bring us the most fascinating information, which you have, and we're not even done yet, by the way. This is just the beginning of the whole process, but thanks to your efforts and your interest, you were able to initiate this and get us this far. So I really want to commend you for that. It has made our community happy, and based on the responses that you said from them, it seems like it made them happy too. But tell us about the process of what you had to do to get there. I know that you had to make an initial contact with one of the families. I mean, walk us through the process, because really it's a very interesting story that does kind of have a beginning, middle. It doesn't have an end yet, but it does have a beginning and
No.
yeah.
Well, yes, you're right. The beginning was the contact with Mr. Alejandro Safarov. I said the person I met 15 years ago. And I asked Alejandro to put me in contact with other members of other families. So that was the first step. We began to gather information about the families. As you probably imagine, not every family had the same, knowledge about their past. Some families are pretty aware of, and other families are not aware of. So it was a kind of we were as detectives, just trying to find not only the families but the families who knows about their heritage. So that was the first thing. The second thing we did was it was quite easy at that time to identify where the majority of those families were, and the majority of those families when they arrived to Argentina settled down in the north part of the country in Jujuy province. So it was quite easy because about 24, 30 families arrived during the first 3 decades of the 20th century. And then, of course, other families moved to other cities in Argentina, but the core of the community is in Jujuy province, in the north part of the country. So, first of all, contact with Alejandro Safarov, then identify the members of this community. Third, arriving to the conclusion that they were in El Carmen, which is a small city in the Jujuy province where many of those families are. So that was the first approach, yes, to identify where this community was settled when they arrived to Argentina, and how many of those families we can reach at this moment.
And then once you reached them, what was that like? And how did they receive the idea of what you were doing?
Well, they were extremely happy. Even I imagine that some of the members of the community are online right now here with us, but they were really happy. They organized a meeting to receive me, to share some ideas, memories, showing me pictures of the family, showing me photographs, postcards, personal letters, personal documentation, where it is clear and state that the families came from this part of northwestern Iran. Majority of the families came from the villages of Patamur, mainly. It's a very tiny village near the Urumi Lake. Um, then they were even flattered, knowing that someone was interested in the life of and the history of their community, and also they were very curious about the possibility to be in contact with other Chaldeans in for example, the Chaldean Cultural Center. Say, okay, that would be a great opportunity because we are here alone, and we want to preserve and we want to say what we know about the history of our family. So it was the best reception I could ever imagine.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. We were so happy when we heard that because, you know, before you left, you weren't really sure how they were going to react, if they're going to receive, if they're going to be more private. So the fact that they were that excited to be, like we said, like kind of found, you know,
Yeah.
that so
And I have to say, they were very open to share family stuff with us. So I think we have to appreciate that. It's very, very important because it was the first contact that we had a meeting in person. And then the person who is not even member of the community came here with many questions. And but I have to be very, very, very honest. I also a bit shocked about the positive reaction they had.
and did some of them have you sent us some documents and such, but has anybody there documented or have has like maybe like a manuscript of any of the experiences of their ancestors, or have they themselves kept any kind of diaries about their lineage or anything like that that you know of?
As far as I know, there is not such a kind of diary, but we have some personal letters that, and based on that, and based on other documents, we can begin to reconstruct the trip. They decided to left Iran at the beginning of the 20th century. They received a lot of help from the Catholic Church, mainly from Spaniards priests who were working there, and then they traveled through the Caucasus, northern Caucasus, mainly Georgia, or that was in a very complex situation at that time as well, as you know, and other through the Ottoman Empire. They reached Europe, and from Europe they arrived to Argentina. And here in Argentina, they were received by also by the Lazarist order. The Lazarist order was, I think, they had the, the the plan, I would say, the plan. So they were this trip was mainly based on the support of the Lazarist Order, the Catholic Church, and some Spaniards and French priests who were working in Iran at that time. That's what we know. And then we have some memories, but they're not very, because we still do not have a comprehensive way, but it is confirmed by different sources and different families were just completing. It's like a puzzle. Yes, someone was saying a bit, another was adding a second stuff, and all the things. So, but this is, I mean, in a very general way, what we can say about how they reach Argentina, because this was a very, very interesting question. Yes, why this group of people came to Argentina, not to the capital, but to a very tiny village in the north part of Argentina. Imagine this city 100 years ago. So how did they reach this city? And I think that I'm pretty confident that we are going to be able to reconstruct this trip because this is something that we have to do. Is not only to rely on the material that these families still have, but also based on those memories and those documents, try to go to a different archive, yeah? The Lazarist archive, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs archive, and try to help us to understand a bit more about this.
So, Paulo, it seems that, based on the time frame that you said that they left the area, it was related. Was some of it related to the genocide that was taking place over the time in those regions? Because we just finished a book club. We had Professor Emily Porter, who was in England, and we did this book club on memoirs of a Babylonian princess, and it was about a Chaldean woman who had to leave, who says that she has some some origins from India, but she's a Chaldean in from the northern part of Iraq, and from Tilkepa, and her family was very affected and persecuted because of their religion, and then she ended up leaving the country and going to other parts of the Middle East and to Europe as well. And I'm just wondering, were there any stories that related was that the major part of the reason that they left during that time?
Well, at this moment,
or is it different? Is it like, did you
yeah,
receive different stories from different people?
I would say that there's a mix between the different, I mean, the causes of the movement of this population. First of all, it seems that the idea to leave Iran was about 1910. It seems that a group of the Chaldeans of this part of the world visited Rome, and they was to ask for help for the Catholic Church to lead this part. It was not only related to persecutions. Of course, there was some ideas that, of course, it is not on a written way, but we can try to reconstruct. But of course, it has to do as well. But as far as we can see, it was related mainly to the lack of perspective, the economic crisis. And then we had a couple of letters that confirm us. I mean, the milestone, the most important event was the First World War, because we have a very interesting letter where a person tells to another member of his family about the changes, the boundaries, how I mean, we were part of Iran, then the Russians arrived and they helped us. Then the Ottomans arrived and there was a war. Then the Iranians returned. And so this situation in about, imagine, 2 or 3 years, it was very complex. So the idea to lead the region was before the persecution, was before the First World War, but then, of course, after those tragic events took place, those families wanted even to abandon this place. And what we can say is that those families arrived to Argentina in a period of time of more than 30 years. Yes, we can say that the first families, not families, the men arrived maybe 1910, then the wives and the kids arrive, and then the last families arrived in the early 30s. So it's a long period of time where, first of all, the men alone, then the families, and then other families arrived to Argentina in a period of 30 years. And so that, again, it has to do with the economic crisis, with social crisis, persecution, and regional crisis as well.
So I have a question here, and actually it's a very good question that Deborah Najjar is asking, and she's wondering if these Chaldeans are from Iran or Iraq. And I think that's another thing that was, I just did a story, by the way, for the Chaldean News about Chaldeans in India. And we found out from a local person who lived in India, a local Chaldean, her name is Esma. We learned from her that there's a large community there. I had heard from it before, but she helped introduce us to the members so that we can interview them. And so when we looked into the history of that story, we saw that there's so much connection and how it started very long ago, how they were Chaldeans, because I was trying to understand, well, were you Chaldeans before? Are you the same Chaldeans? But they're Chaldean Indian, they're Indians but they follow the Chaldean faith, and they consider themselves Chaldean, the Catholic faith. So we're kind of curious, how does this relate to us being Chaldean? Is it the same group? And I tried to look up the particular area that you said is from Iran. I could not find it. I did a quick search. I didn't go very deep because I was trying to see if that was that part of Mesopotamia before it was in 1921, before the British, changed the name to Iraq. So can you give us a little bit background about that? I think that is a little bit of a, we're talking about the community in Argentina as a new thing, but even in Iran, I know there are a lot of Chaldeans in Iran. But do you know the history of that you can share for our audience to better understand it?
Yes, of course. Well, three things. First of all, they refer themselves as Caldani. That is 100% of the family say that, well, my father, my grandfather say we were Caldani. And this is the first, the point of departure, let's say that way. Then they were, this is strong Catholic identity. But since they were a very tiny community, when they arrived to Argentina, they unfortunately they lose many of the Chaldean customs and liturgy because they were Romanized. Let's say they were living in this very small town. They were Catholic 100%. So they say, okay, we're going to go to the mass, but since we do not have a priest, we're going to have the Roman Latin Catholic priest, not a Chaldean priest. So this is that. Then they preserve the Syriac language for at least two generations, at least a group of them. Now, what we can say is that some of the members of this community, they still remember some prayers or isolated words or expressions, but unfortunately, there is not a single member of the community who still have the opportunity to speak Syriac. Well, in 2019 died the last member of this community who spoke in Syriac. He was a kind of official translator of the member of the community. Yes, they came from villages near the Lake Urmia, which is Iran, and it is near Salmas, Khosroba, Patamur, is very tiny villages that today, as far as I know, there are not a very important villages or centers, but they came from what were in 100 years ago, 100% Christians villages in that part of Iran. Okay, and there was as according to some of the members of those families, they say that the parents used to say that there were also a group of Jewish families living among them as well. That's pretty interesting.
Oh, that is very interesting too. Yeah, because that was the case. I also had read another book, My Father's Paradise, where he talks about the Jewish
Yeah.
and the Christian communities and the Muslim communities living in the villages in the northern area, and they really at that time lived in harmony, and probably that community had experienced the same thing. So it seems like, because based on they were fairly small, because they were small, that they didn't create like how other communities where they created their own
No.
church, they couldn't expand too much on their community. So it also seems like they didn't continue to bring immigrants, or to bring their like other family members did not follow them. Is that why they kind of maintain that same smallness in size?
Yes, you're right. They were not able to build up a community or to bring other people or the extended family to Argentina. But some members of this community visited Iran and sometimes other parts of the Middle East where other members of the extended families were living. Actually, they show me some photographs of members of the communities who visited Iran until even, let's say, the Iranian Revolution. And that's a very important issue because until the, let's say, late 70s, some members of this community managed to visit Iran. Some of them stayed there with the families for a couple of months or even years. One of the members of the community was living in Tabriz in Iran for a couple of years. Um, the, but then after the Iranian Revolution, the Iran-Iraq War in the 80s, they stopped being in contact with this member of the family. And then it has to do with the new generation that are fully integrated into Argentinian society. They were losing this part of the identity. It is quite understandable, of course, that we
Right.
have to say.
So, Paulo, you spent quite a bit of time with them. Even before that, you were already researching this topic, and you've spent some time with them. And there's a possibility that you would either revisit or reconnect somehow. What are, you know, what are the future possible ways to document these people's stories, and to hear their stories, to also shed light on, you know, not only like their current stories, but I mean, even learn about their descendants, like their names. I know you said one of the members that you had talked to, he was wondering if we might know some people that they're related. Chaldeans are like that, by the way. I have such a hard time keeping up with that. So the first when they see you, who are you the daughter of? And then they try to trace it back many generations back. And
Yes.
with my memory, it's like, how do you know, it's really an art, but it's something that is very valuable to them. So when you said that about one of the people, my heart, like, I was just so touched, because that's one of the things that we care so much about. So for us to do something, what do you see a possible future for that?
Well, possible future regarding the activities, it would be to conduct interviews to try to recall those the memories of those families. Actually, we began. We have just the very first interview. We're trying to edit and to translate into English, of course. And then to gather and to organize the majority of the artifacts of those families, postcard, photographs, documents, letters, and to reconstruct from an academic point of view the history of the community. And then I think it is very relevant to not only to add this a new piece of the patchwork of the Argentinian society that we're not aware of, but also try to help this community and the descendants to be in contact with other Chaldeans. And I think that would be great, because they deserve to be part of the Chaldean diaspora.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for the work again. Like, I mean, you started this. It was a wonderful idea, and you kept going with it. A lot of good ideas come along, but people don't necessarily follow through or execute them. But you've really hung on to this story. And I just, I want to know, like, if you have any last thoughts, words for our community, or the community in general, for the Chaldean community, based on what you just experienced through this whole process.
Well, I only have to thank the Caldea Cultural Center for the interest in this activity, and I hope we can continue working on that and try to build up and to reconstruct this part of the Chaldean diaspora in Argentina, in South America.
Thank you so much, Paulo. Next time we'll have you on with one of the Chaldeans from Argentina. Okay.
That would be great.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.